The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Hyundai, New Thinking, New Possibilities, and also by Borg Warner, Feel Good About Driving, Continental Automotive, The Future in Motion. Learn more at continental-automotive.com. Henkel, Excellence is our passion. And by IAC, Inspiration comes from within.
Welcome to the 2015 Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you live from the floor of the North American International Auto Show in Detroit, and even more specifically from the display area from Hyundai. And we really want to thank Hyundai for making their display area available for our discussion today. We're going to have 3 different panels talking about different topics, including how new technology companies can try to get into the auto industry and what they want to see happen doing that. We'll also be talking about autonomous technology and the liability that's going to go along with that. And then finally, we're going to get a viewpoint of the automotive industry from Mexican suppliers and how they see it all going. And we're going to get going with all that right after this.
Night, Ted.
Night.
Remember when your trunk wasn't smart enough to open for you? When only your living room had HD.
Hi, babe.
You're not gonna make it, are you?
And a little weather could ruin your plans.
Come on. Have I ever let you down?
Well,
Don't answer that.
The all-new Genesis with H-Track all-wheel drive from Hyundai.
All right, boys, let's do it.
Welcome back to the live portion of the 2015 Autoline Supplier Symposium, where we'll be talking about new suppliers coming in, new technology suppliers. This panel was organized by the OESA, the Original Equipment Supplier Association. And joining me on today's panel are Talal Kakish, the Director for North America Automotive at Methode Electonics, Ramzi Hermiz, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Shiloh Industries, and Marty Mills, the Key Account Manager for Automotive and the Central Region for Maxwell Technologies. And gentlemen, thank all 3 of you for coming on today's Supplier Symposium.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having us.
Talal, let me start with you. You're a company that gets into power, data, sensors, switches. I know that you were at the CES show just a week ago. What's some of your reaction about CES and its really ability to match the speed of the electronics industry, the consumer electronics industry? Can we get the automotive industry up to that kind of a speed, and how do we do that and maintain the robustness that automakers need?
Thanks, John. Yeah, it was a very interesting show this year. I've been there for about 8 years now, and this is the biggest automotive presence I had seen at CES ever. There were more OEMs and bigger booths within the OEMs, and the Tier 1s and Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers were all showing automotive products. There's a couple of million people out there that just trying to make sure that we are hooked to our phones, hooked to our cell phones, and they're doing a good job at it. I am, and I think most people are too. So how do the OEMs react to that? A lot of the tiers, we're trying to help the OEMs do that. So I think connectivity is a big thing, getting a robust connectivity, because the phones keep changing. They change a lot faster than the vehicles, and the OEMs aren't going to change the connectivity protocol every 6 months like they do the phones. So getting a robust connectivity. But the biggest thing that I saw there too, which is I think going to influence our industry, is the driver distraction concerns. A lot more technologies out there and companies showing solutions for driver distractions. I think that's going to really help us going forward.
And I want to get into more of that, but let's move down the line here. Ramzi, your company is involved in a lot of light weighting. But Shiloh is a company that's very different than it was even just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, we have gone through a lot of transformation. We've been in lightweighting, but it was never marketed as such. And so with our laser welded blanks, and how do we maximize or reduce the weight and maximize efficiency of the use of material? But we've also added aluminum die casting for structural die casting. We've added magnesium. So when you talk about lightweighting materials, we're agnostic to the powertrain. So it's about the vehicle. How do we take weight out of the vehicle? And and it is with different technologies and often different solutions. So the same application we can offer to you in a stamped product, an aluminum casted product, or a magnesium die casted product. So that unique technology approach, and really doing it globally, because primarily we're traditionally a U.S. company. Now we have operations in Europe, and we're expanding in China in 2015 as well.
Really good. We'll want to get into more of that in just a minute, but I want to get Marty into the discussion too. And Marty, your company, Maxwell Technologies, is into ultra capacitors. And for the audience who may not be aware of where that might be used in automotive, give us a brief description.
Sure. Ultra capacitors, also known as supercapacitors, are currently being used in start-stop systems today, primarily in Europe, and we're also in discussions with OEMs, but active suspension, telematics, anything that requires peak power demand requirements or backup power demand requirements for short durations of time is where an ideal play would be for ultracapacitors.
Well, Talal, let me come back to you. And it's interesting, here we have 3 companies bringing out all different kinds of new technology. But my question is, when you go to the auto industry with it, what's it like? What are some of the issues that you're trying to overcome to let automakers be aware of what your capabilities are? And as you face different automakers, I'm sure each and every one of them has a different way of how they want to be approached.
Yeah, on paper, all the OEMs have their process of how to get technology from the supplier to production. And on paper, it's great, but the reality sometimes is different. And I think the OEMs that have been successful that we've seen are the ones that have a champion that it's outside of their normal process. This champion is just responsible for getting that technology through the process, like a program manager. When it's a part-time job for the same person that actually has to design the product, he's got to find the technology. It makes it hard to do that. So what we found is OEMs actually have a good process that also has a champion that could take it from the first level meeting all the way up to the VP within a set process, has a success rate of getting new technologies into their vehicles.
Well, go into a little bit more detail of that. I find that very interesting that you can get to a vice president level, because one of the complaints I always hear from startups especially is they don't know where to go to in a car company, much less being able to get to the vice president level.
So, I mean, I'm sure we don't want to mention all the different OEMs by name, but one particular OEM, within 2 months, we went from initial discussion about the technology we had to a meeting with the VP because of this champion. And there's other OEMs that we do business with all the time that even though we have all the different connections, it still gets hard to get through the system because they have so much going on in their daily lives. So having a champion, I think, makes a big difference within that process.
Ramzi, do you run into the same issue?
I would say each OEM has a different approach and a different way to move forward. I think what we're seeing with our technology and the solutions that we're providing, lightweighting is one of the top issues that all OEMs have. So the issue that we are presenting ourselves to help solve is that a traditional approach. So you typically may have seen an application solved one way. Now there's a much more open mind of how to approach it. And if you look at many of the OEMs, the individuals now responsible for purchasing out of the engineering group. So that technology, how do they bring it through? I think there's as much for our product, I'll say, a pull and a push. And I think that's been an ideal situation for us. They're looking for not just being dealing with purchasing. The purchasing organizations are encouraging us to engage with engineering and encouraging us to get involved earlier in the program. So I'd say there's a fundamental shift in how our customers are looking to solve. Maybe it's not every product or every technology, but the specific area that we operate in, and our magnesium solutions, our aluminum solutions. We came out with an aluminum laser welded blank. It's the first one in the industry. It's formidable, so you can do things with aluminum that we're showing that people didn't think were possible. And so there's clearly an open mind, both from the purchasing organization as well as maybe traditionally the engineering, but that collaboration with our customers, I think it's at some of the best levels we've seen in a long time.
I agree with Ramzi. I think there's a lot of communication that's happening now from the OEM perspective, saying, show me the benefits of what I can use this for.
The value proposition.
The value proposition.
Here's that value proposition.
Here's the value proposition, and then they're willing to champion it through the system to get their management's approval.
And Marty, same thing.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we face is making sure that we're doing everything we can to educate not only the OEM but also the Tier 1s, because we have to partner with other Tier 1 typically to do the power electronics and other things that go along with the system. One of the successes that we've had is by doing so, going to the OEMs and some of the tier ones. We actually had one OEM tell us that he's educating the tier one on our technology. So that was a wonderful experience to go through, but you have to hit the bases as much as you can and share that with
And
Ramzi.
I'd say with the tier one, I mean, if you look at Shiloh, we've gone from, 500 million in 2012 to we're approaching over $1 billion now. So pretty rapid growth over a couple of years. But that's been both with a tier one and a tier two, because a lot of our technologies, the OEM has outsourced certain applications. But now that tier one, who traditionally wasn't in it, is seeking that technology. So in this case, it's being not necessarily always a directed buy, but there's that encouragement to pull technology through. So from our standpoint, it's how do you work with the tier one, which we are one. So we're a tier one and a tier two. And how do you find that balance of how do you support, in some cases, some people who are your competitors, but helping them because they happen to have a part of the application. So it's an interesting dynamic that I think we've seen.
Yeah. We're in the
over
same
the last couple of years.
We're in the same boat. We've shifted from being solely a tier one to now a tier one and a tier two at times. And you're right. Sometimes you're talking to your competitors. Sometimes OEMs are bringing everyone together. Sometimes you have to show the tiers where you need to go to educate them to help them. So depending on the technology, it's kind of shifting. The industries are all mixing.
Right.
Ramzi, coming back to you, you've mentioned how much Shiloh has grown. How do you even make your customers aware of your new capabilities?
That is, it's been an interesting process because it's not, there's some advertising that goes in there, and it's customer meetings, but it's really as much about bringing on a larger team and educating the team of what's new in Shiloh. And then as we work with the customers and the engineering teams, it's educating. We've done a number of tech days at our customers where we've brought all the technology to them, and they'll coordinate a meeting where they bring all their engineers, and we'll do technical papers and presentations so they can understand what we have. But it has been an active challenge to educate, and our customer base is now global. So we're talking to customers that we traditionally hadn't spoken to, and so now we're introducing the total portfolio, not just what's new to them. And it's been an interesting dynamic, and it's actually made the business fairly exciting.
We've had really good success in doing the same thing Ramzi's doing by, doing lunch and learns or bringing a group of engineers, because you never know what's going to trigger an idea in somebody's mind. Well, I have this application that might be able to use, your solution. And it could be something totally different what you went in there for to begin with. So it really sparks a lot of ideas by doing that.
And I was just going to say, we've shifted also like our presentation style to a certain point to more of a roundtable conversation discussion to spark ideas like Marty's saying versus a traditional supplier just up there going through 150 slides. We kind of more want to have a discussion. Here's some of the technologies we do, here's some of the products that we've done, but let's talk about your needs and what you guys are looking for.
A simple example, somebody would say you have a center console. Typically you see them in a plastic type of material. Well, a lot of them were, as people lean on them, they're finding they were cracking. Nobody would think that you'd go to a magnesium type of solution. So it's by having that conversation of what's a problem, what's a pinch point, what's keeping you up at night, where are you seeing recall, and having that type of conversation to say, did you ever think of this type of solution? And that, again, I think that's as much a rapid change. I mean, OEMs, it's not so much model years anymore, it's almost how do I upgrade within that model year? How do I make an enhancement and solve a problem? Because the customer, I think as a consumer, we're all getting more critical. We're expecting higher standards, we're expecting quicker response, and so as a supply base, I think that's part of what we talk about. Some of our business tenets is how do we operate with purpose, urgency, and speed? And more you're finding, how do I do something faster, more efficiently, more quickly to satisfy a changing environment?
But even though you're discussing these things and finding their pain points and how you can help them overcome, Marty, I got to believe, especially something with supercapacitors, ultracapacitors, that's all new technology. And this is an industry that, I'm not going to say it's anti-technology, it's not, but boy, they want things to be so reliable and so robust. How do you overcome that with them?
Well, it takes again, I go back to that education word, but one of the challenges that we face too is, looking at another supplier I worked for in the past, typically things are part to print, they're very easy to get, into the purchasing cycle. But with a new technology such as ours, it takes almost 2 years just to get them educated, make sure it's safety conscious. You have to educate not just one group of engineers. There's multiple disciplines within the organization that you have to satisfy before you can get to that phase where you're actually starting to quote on a platform. So it's a long process, but it's necessary.
Talal, you find the same thing, that you have to really work with them to get them to a comfort level with your technology?
Yeah, and I agree with Marty too that it's multiple groups. There's multiple disciplines within the OEM that have to sign off, and they have different objectives, right? Their end objective is to come up with a great vehicle for the consumer, but their management is tracking them differently. So the quality organization is looking at it very differently from engineering, who's looking at it very differently from the advanced engineering, who's purchasing is completely on another side. So it is an education process and trying to get each one, finding the value proposition that we talked about for each group and trying to see how you can manage that.
So what I'm hearing is it's communication. Absolutely. You really got to talk to the benefits of what you can offer.
And I think it's always been that way. The difference is there's so much technology that needs to be pulled. I think what we're seeing is the need for more technology. It's a faster shift. We're trying to achieve certain regulations that are put out there for CAFE, what have you. So there is a driver to make some of these improvements or enhancements more immediate than traditionally self-imposed. And I think that's also creating the need for there's always been communication, but now there's a sense of urgency on how do we pull that forward.
I think that's a great point. The business has been a business for 100 years, right? But you're absolutely right. CAFE, zero emissions, safety, it's really pushing the agenda a lot faster than it did in the past.
And when you look at
globalization too,
right,
exactly. With the competition in every region coming in from all areas, it's making it tough for the OEMs. They want to get there faster.
One of the points, and we talked about a little bit ago, is everybody's trying to take out weight, which is what's part of our portfolio, and interested in new ideas. And that's one of the top. There's a survey done, and that one of the top issues for all OEMs is how do they lighten the vehicle. But it's not just a traditional product that let's say Shiloh manufactures, which is what our portfolio is. Even from product we were talking about earlier, right. How do you make a capacitor lighter? How do you make that packaging smaller? So it really doesn't matter what your technology or portfolio is. Some of the key drivers of impacting emissions or impacting fuel economy are relevant in almost any one of our products. That's our business, but it's in actually everybody's business.
Right. They always want more because now that they understand your technology, they say, well, can you get us this much more and this much more voltage or smaller packaging? Yeah. That's the nature of this business. So
it really is. And it's fascinating listening to the three of you from three different areas of the business talk about how you bring new technology to the auto industry. With that, we're going to have to wrap this up. I want to thank you all. Talal Kakish with Methode Electronics, Ramzi Hermiz, CEO of Shiloh Industries, Marty Mills with Maxwell Technologies. I want to thank all three of you for having been part of this.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John.
Stay with us. We're going to be coming back right after the short break with our second panel discussion, and I hope you'll join us for that.
All right.
Okay, here's the plan. You're going to want to turn right.
In 0.2 miles.
Good. No, watch the lane.
And we have this really great view.
Got a car in our blind spot.
And we learned how to salsa dance.
He was dancing.
Backseat drivers just met their match. Introducing the entirely new Sonata.
You forgot to turn off the...
From Hyundai.
Dan Willetts is the Vice President of Automotive at Henkel. Great to have you here. And you've got to explain what some of these show and tell objects are. Why don't we start with the sort of can-like object you've got in front of you, Dan?
Okay, John. So it's great to be here, and it's really exciting talking about some of these technologies because most people don't really have a clear idea of what Henkel does. So this is an ordinary aluminum beverage can. And you think of aluminum, you think about lightweighting. So we also want to strengthen the vehicle as well. So this technology, it's called TerraCore, and it's an epoxy. So you put it on the aluminum, and you can feel how strong it is.
Let me see that. Yeah, so I mean, I can't crush this at all. Whereas if it were just a regular aluminum can, especially with the lid cut off, I could crush this easily.
Very easy. So people think if you use aluminum, your car is not as strong. That's not the case. If you use the right technologies with it, you can get lighter and stronger at the same time.
So, and this is an epoxy that you, just like tape on to wherever you need on a car?
You design it in up front. It's key to design it in early, and when you do, it cures during the paint shop. So the paint process, it uses a standard process in an automotive assembly plant to cure.
So this would be ideal for if you had any weak spots on cars, you could come and put this exactly where it's needed?
Absolutely. A pillars, B pillars, wherever you need that solution, you put it where you don't need it. You don't have to worry about the weight. It's an ideal solution.
Okay, what are these two little golf ball-like size things?
Okay, so here's an example of what we call high damping foam. So when you're in your car and you roll down your window a little bit, you'll hear the roof bowing, the thumping, or when you're driving down the road and you'll hear raindrops on your roof because they're using thinner and thinner gauge steel and metals in your vehicle. Well, what happens is you get all that noise. Well, this is a product, it's called high damping foam, and I'll do a little demonstration here.
So one bounces multiple times and this other one just sits dead as you drop it.
Absorbs the noise. So for instance, on the rain, you get a 4 dB enhancement in your noise.
4 dB is a huge reduction in
4
noise.
decibels. It's incredible. So and this, again, this works in today's processes, so you can use it in today's production, and you can also design it in for the future.
You spray it on? How does that get applied?
It's a pumpable product. So you pump it on, you replace current mastics and heavy melt sheets. So people put a lot of these melt sheets on their vehicles, which they're made out of tar, and they're very heavy and very cumbersome. You can pump this in instead, and you have a much better and quieter solution.
Very interesting. And what's this last thing with wires and a battery attached to it?
So the last thing here is just another idea. In this product, it's a very low pressure, low temperature molding compound. It's a hot melt material, and I'm just going to turn it on. You know, it's Christmas time or the holidays here. So what it does is you see this product here, and it's flexible on the wires itself. So it is an enhancement of the coating process and the sealing process. So you can get rid of the module, you can get rid of the housing, you can get rid of the cover, you can get rid of the potting materials. You can replace it all with something that simple, John, and it's only about $5,000 for a mold. So you can put these molds out and basically mold any type of solution onto your electronics. And as we all know, there's more and more electronics in cars nowadays. So you have a great solution that gives you a lot of design flexibility, and you could put those in your vehicles today.
And hermetically sealed then, so.
Hermetically sealed, yes.
Very interesting. So Dan, people are going, hey, this is very interesting stuff. Where can they get more information?
So we'd like to, these examples here really create a lot of thought processes. So we want to bring people into our labs. And it's very simple. Go to www.henkelna.com/tour. So we want engineers to come to our facilities because when you talk about adhesives or coatings, most people don't have a good idea of what they do. So we want to show them what they can do, and we want them to see our experts.
And design it in up front, not just as a Band-Aid afterwards.
Absolutely. So you can get a much better solution, lower cost, higher capability, higher functionality, less weight. And you're talking with chemists and you're talking with engineers. They do this every day. They're very passionate about it. And I tell you, they blow your socks away.
Dan Willets, thanks so much for coming in and sharing some of the technology at Henkel. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Welcome back to the 2015 Autoline Supplier Symposium, coming to you live from the floor of the North American International Auto Show in Detroit from the Hyundai display. We really want to thank our friends at Hyundai for making this space available. Our next panel discussion is all going to be about autonomous technology and liability. And we've got three people who can really talk about this, including Dr. Andrew Brown, the Chief Technologist with Delphi, Jennifer Dukarski, who deals with intellectual property, media, and technology litigation with Butzel. And we also have Giuseppe Rosso, the Chief Technology Officer for Magneti Marelli. I want to thank all three of you for joining us for this discussion.
My pleasure.
And so Dr. Brown, why don't we start with you? I really like autonomous technology, but how can the auto industry proceed with this knowing that it's going to be safe and secure and it's something that they should do?
Excellent question. I think there are basically 4 things that the auto industry has to make happen. Number one, it has to make sure the designs are secure. Second, that the vehicles, when they're manufactured reliably, because now it's a supply chain issue, because the way the industry works, there are several suppliers that provide parts that go into systems, etc. So you have to have the confidence that one supplier's part is safe and secure, so that ultimately when all parts get into a subassembly, that a subassembly is safe and secure. And then thirdly, we have to make sure that the vehicle can operate safely, and meaning that no one externally can disrupt the safe and comfortable drive of a vehicle. And then fourth, we have to assure the integrity of the people in the system. So those 4 elements are key to assuring that autonomous vehicles are going to be safe and secure.
Good, we'll get into more of this discussion too, but I want to get Jennifer into it right now. Okay, you heard Dr. Brown say it, but you're the lawyer and you've got to be warning these people, even if you meet his 4 criteria, you still got to be on the lookout for legal issues.
Well, from a start, he's spot on. He's identified a few of the major areas with major ramifications. You know, product liability doesn't change. The car might be autonomous, it may eventually be self-driving, but you still have the liability issues. But there are some other nuances. What happens if it's an infrastructure issue that causes the problem? Who do you go after in that type of an accident? Or even with a data breach, what happens if the vehicle information that contains anything private about you, including where you're driving to, it is leaked in the public? Think about Target, but on the scale of your vehicle. So these are other issues and major concerns that are definitely at play here.
And Giuseppe, there's still this issue of who's involved in what, right? I mean, you've got suppliers like yourself, Magneti, Marelli, plus you have the OEMs who might be the integrators. How do you see this developing?
So basically, if we can summarize, the classification for autonomous driving is in 6 steps from 0 to 5, where 0 means that the driver do everything by itself, longitudinal lateral control. Level 1, when for some subsystem there will be the machine that is making all the longitudinal lateral control. The level 2 is when let me say, the seat is some feature is driven automatically by the car, but the driver is always under control of the situation. Level 3, that is the first really versus autonomous driving, where the driver can do other things for some use case, but and to be able to, in a very short time, to take the control of the car. It means that the system have to recognize that the situation is not good and give the information the driver the right way to make it. Level 4, for use case as completely autonomous, the driver can sleep. Level 5 could be also without the driver, let me say, in some extent. Okay. But in this situation, obviously, basically, the level of real automatization, in our opinion, cannot be supplied by a tier 1 to the OEM, because it's too big into the car, it's too inclusive into the car. But probably also in the value of the car, because it go to touch powertrain, HMI, or a lot of different systems. In this case, we think that, starting from the fact that the OEM will integrate the final system, the role of tier 1 will be to work on some sub-component. The main sub-component I can summarize are: one is a big domain control, electronic control, that it will include all the functionality related to autonomous driving that the car maker wants. Second are the smart sensors. Module smart sensor means intelligent camera, radar, LiDAR, and so on. The third one will be some software functionality, like precise positioning, like path planning, all this type of thing that is possible that car maker can buy from different players. This is the 3 key feature, and the tier 1 will work in one of these 3. Plus the system integration, in my opinion, will be done by the car maker, or he will define some tier 1 that will help him. Moreover, there are 2 other areas will become more and more important connected to the autonomous driving, even if are, let me say, connected. One is the HMI, you have to understand in which way to give the information to the driver in the most effective way, whether the driver can recognize immediately, can take the control of the car, and the connectivity means V2X, V2E, the connection with the infrastructure, connection with the other car, in way to improve the level of safety of the system. But the tier 1 role will be to make one or more of these components under the umbrella of the car maker. Could be that the car maker at the beginning will work with one tier 1 to cover this type of things, but will be only at the beginning to define the requirement of the system, because it is a know-how that not always the car maker has at home. After years, this type of know-how will work in the tier 1 in this way, taking from the different parts and integrating together.
Dr. Brown, how do you get all these disparate elements to start working together at the tier and the OEM level? And I know you had talked earlier about an ISAC. Explain what that is, and will that play a role in doing it?
As Giuseppe described, I mean, designing, manufacturing a car or a vehicle, we know, is a very complex process. There are a lot of elements, a lot of players. The key, however, when we're dealing with threats like cybersecurity, et cetera, is to make sure that everyone's working on the same page, right? Just like our just-in-time inventory processes that we have for production today. Same thing on the issues of cybersecurity, but it starts with the OEM. The OEM sets the architecture, sets the requirements, and will set what needs to be done to make those parts safe and secure. So it starts with the OEM and the architecture. Now, in terms of approaches that will help the industry, this idea of an ISAC, which is simply an information sharing and analysis center. It's used in the aerospace industry, it's used in financial services, and it's a way by which to identify potential threats, identify incidents that may have occurred, and to share that information. So in the industry, if we have an ISAC, which is a third-party, non-biased, platform to share information, okay, then we know how to design. We know what the threats are. We know how to prevent and know even when a threat is occurring and inhibit those. So recently here, the global automakers, the Auto Alliance, announced that they were going to establish an ISAC. And in fact, NHTSA has been supportive of them doing that. And so with the establishment of that ISAC, we start the process by which to identify the needs, requirements, and the architecture where everyone in the industry can share, whether it's an OEM or a supplier.
I love that idea. I think information sharing is a great one. But even if they do all that, Jennifer, there's still liability that they have to worry about. And talk about the different levels of that.
Absolutely. From the standpoint of the data involved in the ISAC, it's a fantastic idea, and as they push forward, they're going to discover some of the problems that have already come to the forefront. In some of the DARPA challenges and some of the DARPA grants, they found that access is a little bit easier than people think it is. There are risks directly from the vehicle-to-vehicle devices, from Bluetooth, from mobile apps, and even from physical threats plugging into your OBD2 port. So just plugging in, you're running the risk of somebody either dropping some sort of software that could have the equivalent of ransomware, lock your car down and ask you to pay money to get it out of jail. In essence, you still have the risks because those cyber thieves and cyber terrorists and cyber criminals are always a step or two ahead. Now, the nice thing about the Auto ISAC is that they're pushing for this. It's more of a grow up and be developing alongside the technology rather than what a lot of industries like the credit card industry are doing. They're bolting on at a later date this technology and this data security. So from that standpoint, there's still liability issues and a lot of the plaintiffs' attorneys, no offense to them, but they're getting crafty these days and finding ways to go out and try to hold a company accountable for data breach.
How do you think that this issue of bringing autonomous technology to market will work its way through the courts? Because isn't that where this is going to get resolved?
Well, eventually, probably. And I think a lot of the issues are really well-settled areas of law. product liability, so if something goes wrong, if there's a defect, we have the traditional manufacturer's defects, we have traditional design defects. Those things will go up and be handled like they always are. Some of the new issues, though, that I do see nuanced is all of these technologies are so wonderful, and many of the companies, particularly those in Silicon Valley, are so excited to promote how good their driverless vehicles are, that they're so much better than most professional drivers, that once they make those types of claims, you now have what we call a misappropriation or a misstatement type claim that you're able to make based on the fact that you're suggesting your product should live up to a higher standard. So that is an entirely new buzz that folks like the Silicon Valley companies are bringing us.
So don't brag too much just yet, is what you're saying.
We've been historically good in the auto industry of not doing that, but you're right.
Giuseppe, there's still another issue here, a moral issue too, right? In terms of programming these autonomous cars in making decisions.
Yes, so basically on this topic, yeah, especially, okay, not in the short term, I think, because my idea that the level 4 or 5 of autonomous driving is something that will arrive in 2025, far away from now. But anyway, surely there will be the case where the car will have to take a decision to preserve the life of the people in the car or the life of the people that it can crash. Or if the car is without the driver in that moment, is going to the parking to go absolutely versus a wall to avoid to make this type of thing. This is a kind of electronic personality that have to be defined, built. It's something that this moment is not. But it's surely something that will be one topic to think about to work. It's like for a robot. This is will become a robot.
That's right. Dr. Brown, any thoughts on that?
Well,
do I make my autonomous car crash into pedestrians or crash into another car if there's no alternative? It's almost a moral dilemma.
Well, ultimately, we firmly believe that the default situation is that the driver's always in control. Okay, we're not advocating that we can have fully autonomous vehicles on the road today. We believe that the driver is always ultimately responsible. The driver has to always be able to intervene and take over the operation of the vehicle. So there's still, whether it's software, whether it's more reliable systems, there's work that we still have to do. Now, having said that, realize that we're already working and proving some of these technologies. Think about lane keeping technologies. Think of driver monitoring technologies. These are technologies that ultimately will migrate into the autonomous vehicle. So it's not as if this vehicle appears overnight miraculously. It's going to evolve. Just as Giuseppe described the evolutionary process, this technology will evolve. That's why we're saying it's not here today. It's going to still be 10, 15 years at least before you get to fully autonomous. That gives us time to harden the systems, prove out the components, work out that driver mechanical interface, all of those systems. So ultimately, I'm assured, I believe the industry will solve those issues, but as always, the vehicle has to be safe and secure, and if it means not having a certain functionality, I'm for it, because the driver cannot be out of the picture.
Giuseppe, last thoughts here?
If I can completely agree on this topic, I think until 2020 will be at maximum level 3, the driver always have the last word to manage it. This is clear. Second point I would like to underline that after this level 3, in 2025, 2030, there will be also the concept of redundancy that will come for the first time in the car. Because until the driver can take the control of the car is the redundancy. In the moment where could be our completely autonomous is something that coming from airplane and so on, we have to apply also to the car.
John, if you permit me, let me mention one thing, that the industry is not sitting idly by waiting for these things to evolve or waiting to situations to happen. In 2014, we sponsored, the industry, Butzel, et cetera, a cyber auto challenge. And basically we brought in students, okay, black hatters, white hatters, to hack into vehicles and to determine where their vulnerabilities were, okay, so that we in the industry could learn about where we needed to improve, where the vulnerabilities might be. It's those kinds of efforts that will help us stay out ahead of these situations. And so in 2015, SAE and Butzel are sponsoring another Cyber Auto Challenge that actually will be held at Delphi's facilities in July of this year. And again, we're looking for more OEMs to participate, suppliers to participate. It's all in the process of learning and developing the technology to prohibit these kinds of situations from happening.
That actually sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's the good part.
It does. Look, you know, unfortunately, we're out of time for this panel discussion. You've raised some really good points here. I can't wait to see how this all evolves. I think it's some of the most exciting technology I've ever seen in my lifetime. But I want to thank all three of you. Dr. Andrew Brown, Chief Technologist with Delphi, Jennifer Dukarski with Butzel Long, Giuseppe Rosso, the CTO of Magneti Marelli. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
And don't go away. After this next break, we're going to come back with our third panel talking about what's going on in the Mexican industry. Craig Wiggins is the Senior Vice President for Powertrain for the Americas for the giant supplier company, Continental. And Craig, great to have a chance to chat with you right now.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Where do you see electrification going? Because it looks like there's no way that automakers can meet fuel economy and CO2 standards without some sort of electrification. But even more specifically, is 48 volts ever going to play a role in that? We've heard so much of that talk in the past. What's your view for the future?
It's a great question, John. We believe 48 volts is going to play a major role going forward. As you know, 2025, we're still going to have 95% plus internal combustion engines. But we believe there will be 30% or so that are electrified powertrains at that same time. And those include 48 volt and hybrid and pure BEVs. But we think a 48 volt system will encompass maybe 20% of that space. And if you look at the whole spectrum of hybrid electric vehicles, the 48 volt plays into the mild hybrid space. We calculate that you can see 15% or so fuel economy improvements over any DC cycle or WLTC. And we've had some real life journalism experience over a long weekend, and they actually bettered that. They showed 21% improvement. And that's over a regular downsized gasoline turbocharged DI engine.
What is it about 48 volts that can make a gasoline engine get better fuel efficiency?
Well, there's several different installations, but the simplest install is a starter generator with a DC to DC converter and a lithium-ion battery. It allows you not only start-stop, which gets you some incremental benefit, it also, of course, allows a sailing and a coasting mode. So you can decouple or shut off the engine before you reach a stop. So not only start-stop, but extended start-stop. You also get, of course, boost, and you can provide sailing, so you can shut off the engine while you're driving down the road. And you can see that the engine's off up to a third of the time around a regular driving cycle.
Of course, we have electrified cars today, and they seem to operate mainly on 12 volts. What's the jump to 48 volts get you?
Well, there's different paths you can take. The initial path will be a parallel system with a DC to DC, so you have your 48 volt that also supplies the 12 volt infrastructure for everything else. A longer term, some of the automakers are looking at converting to this 48 volt to power HVAC systems and other systems as well. So that provides you another level of efficiency beyond that. So really coming up with a new architecture.
When do you think we'll see 48 volts start to appear?
We'll see 48 volts within the next 12 to 18 months.
Oh, so right around the corner.
We've got a couple of OEM contracts that are already going into production within the next year and a half.
Hey, I also want to ask you about your turbocharger. I'm so interested that, boy, turbochargers have taken the world by storm, so much so that Continental decided to design its own turbocharger from scratch. Bring us up to date with that effort.
Well, turbochargers, because ICEs are becoming so much more efficient and we need to drive that for our emissions and fuel economy benefits, turbochargers are growing significantly in the global marketplace. And even in the U.S., we went from a very small penetration of turbochargers, will be a third of the market in the U.S. gasoline turbochargers by 2020, which is not that far away. So big growth. We brought some real innovation into the turbocharger marketplace, and I think it's been recognized by the OEMs. One of them, the latest one that we've introduced, is an aluminum turbocharger, first in the passenger car market. Very innovative design, allows for a lot different architecture under the hood because you don't have the 900 degree C turbocharger, you have 120 degree C turbocharger. So you gain efficiencies, you gain weight, you gain overall packaging, and so there's some real advantages to this pretty innovative design. It's not for every engine, but it's more for the smaller engines where you can do a real good system and thermodynamic look.
Has that come out yet already?
That's already available, yes. That's actually in the 3-cylinder BMW Mini is the first application.
Well, that engine's getting rave reviews, so you must be really pleased that you've got your turbo on it.
Yeah, it's a terrific engine. I mean, we have good partners. As you know, we had the Ford Fox engine was our first launch on the 1-liter 3-cylinder in Europe. Has International Engine of the Year. It's won 3 times in a row, so it's a terrific engine, and they're also terrific partners of ours.
Craig Wiggins, thanks so much for this update with what's going on, at least at your end, at Continental.
Thank you very much, John.
A little chemistry goes a long way, especially when it comes to vehicle development. From enabling the use of alternate materials to withstanding extreme vehicle environments, Henkel's adhesive, sealants, and surface technologies provide solutions for every vehicle segment. Come see for yourself. Our Detroit area headquarters offers 12 research and development and testing laboratories with the ability to do full-range testing and validation on actual vehicle parts. Sign up to tour our labs at henkelna.com/tour.
Welcome back to the final panel discussion here at the 2015 North American International Auto Show. We're glad that you're joining us for the Autoline Supplier Symposium. This final panel is all going to be talking about the viewpoint of the automotive industry from a Mexican perspective. And that's because we've got 3 people who really know about that, including Jose de Nigris, the Executive Vice President for Sales, Engineering, Purchasing at a company called Katcon. Armando Tamez is the Chief Executive Officer of Nemak, and Juan Solana is the Consul General with Mexico here in Detroit. I want to thank all three of you for joining us on this discussion.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Jose, why don't we start with you? Seems to me that every time I turn around, there's a new automaker announcing more plant expansion in Mexico, more suppliers going there. What's your viewpoint? How did 2014 end up, and where do we see 2015 going?
Yes, thank you for the invitation, John. I think it's important to mention that Mexico is really a land of opportunity. We've seen how the industry has been growing at a very fast pace the last few years. There's very important announcements for the next few years as well. We see growth from American automakers, Japanese, German, Korean. So it's a very exciting time to be in Mexico. We think that it is not only about the growth of a number of units that are going to be produced in Mexico, but also the opportunities that brings for different suppliers. We think that in the long run, the Mexican supply base, along with the others that come into Mexico, are going to benefit from a growing market with a lot of talent in Mexico. So we're very excited about that.
And for those who are not familiar with Katcon, give us a little bit of a description of what you do and why you're so excited.
Sure. Katcon is an exhaust and after treatment company. We make exhaust and after treatment, everything from the manifold all the way to the tailpipe, diesel, gas, light duty, heavy duty. We deal with catalytic converters, diesel particulate filters, everything related to emissions and exhaust. We have a global presence. We have different locations around the world: China, the US, Poland, India, Mexico. But most importantly, what we do is everything from the design of the products all the way to the production. So we are design and engineering capable. We test and validate. We do our own analysis. As apart from manufacturing. So I guess that's something that not a lot of people know, that there is Mexican suppliers like Nemak, like Katcon, that have the capability to design, not only to design in the US or in Mexico, but globally. And so that's why we're excited. We think that suppliers like us are well poised for the future growth in Mexico and elsewhere. But being a Mexican supplier based out of Monterrey, we've been suppliers for the last 21 years in the industry, so we think that the opportunities are going to come our way if we do our homework.
Armando, it's been so impressive to see the growth that Nemak has been going through. Talk a little bit about where you see future opportunities, but also tell us what are some of the concerns that you might have for the auto industry going forward.
Well, certainly, thank you, John. First, we see for Nemak great opportunities in the market, as Jose is indicating. Mexico is growing fast, the automotive industry, not only from OEMs. Just to make clear, OEMs have announced in the last couple of years investments for about 19 billion. All Europeans, North American, and of course Asian automakers are making huge investments. Not only that, but also auto part companies are also making significant investment in Mexico. Mexico today is very well positioned for the following factors. First, it has an available labor force that it is competitive. We have also great engineering schools that are supporting the growth, not only from the OEMs, but also from the supplier base. And I think we have great competitive advantages, good infrastructure in the country, cost competitive, excellent work ethics. But most important, at the end, we're very close to the U.S. Mexico also has more than 42 free trade agreements that help them export to almost anywhere in the world. And I think, again, for our company, Nemak, we're very well positioned. We're enjoying a very high growth, as you're indicating. We have been growing at a pace of about 20% compounded over the last 20 years.
That's an amazing statement.
Thank you. Yes, I think at the end has been a lot of hard work. We started with a facility in Monterrey. Today we have 35 facilities in 15 countries, and we see great opportunities in North America.
Very good. Juan, Armando just mentioned 42 free trade agreements, I think you said. What are some of the other reasons that are driving so much investment in Mexico and so much growth for Mexican companies outside of the country?
I think there are three very important factors. One of them is that we are part of the group is going to call North America. We are working together with Canada, United States, and Mexico to grow together in this new market. So I cannot separate the success of the auto industry here in the United States, the one we have in Mexico. We are integrated. We are almost the same. What is important too is that Mexican market has been growing very strongly. And it's not just the population. We used to be a very populated country. Now we are a middle-class country that's demanding cars every single day. The number size of the family has been reduced, so we have a lot more families right now, and they all need a car. So you have a local market, you have access to North America structure, technologies, ways of doing things. We have a new engineer force in Mexico. So we have a very competitive place to be, not just to sell in the country, but to access other markets. As we just said, you can start building and work in Mexico and sell your cars all the way back to China. So, and this is very interesting. You don't need to move to Mexico. What it means is you have to work together with Mexico, Canada, and United States as a partnership. That's the way it's working, that's the way it's doing. Another thing that's happening finally, we didn't have in the past Mexican companies coming to the United States. Now we have an example of two wonderful companies that have investment here in the United States, providing jobs not just for Mexicans here, but for a lot of Americans. So this kind of integration, this kind of growing together is new for us, and it's happening very fast.
Juan, I want to emphasize that point again. I want to make sure the audience caught that you are now exporting cars from Mexico to China.
That's right. That's happening today. But let's be serious. When we opened one of those cars and we checked the auto parts inside, those auto parts have crossed the borders of the three countries at least 7 times. So we are not exporting cars from Mexico to China. We are exporting cars from North America, built in Mexico, United States, and Canada to China. That's different. Yeah. So we are working as a partners. We are working together. That's the success of this history. And it's not just the Mexicans, it's all together. Yeah. And after 70 years, we have the auto industry, United States auto industry in Mexico. Now we are very integrated and we're working very closely.
Very interesting. Jose, let's come back to you. You talked about not just that you're making things, you're designing and engineering them too. One of the things I keep hearing from automakers and suppliers alike is finding the talent that they need. Can you do that in Mexico?
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually it's very interesting that you point that out, because I've been here in Detroit, the Detroit area, for about 5.5 years. And we started a company from scratch, basically locally, manufacturing, and also we absorbed a technical center. And when you look at the capacity that you can get here in the US, especially in a booming industry, it gets very complicated to find the talent, especially after we know that a lot of professionals left the area when the crisis hit. So now when you look at growing in other areas, when you look at a global company like Nemak, like Katcon, for sure you need to go somewhere else. I mean, there is a certain portion of the work that you can do here that you can do in Europe, but then you need to do it in Mexico. We have a fabulous tech center in Monterrey, Mexico, where we have designers, we have engineers, we have analysis, we do CFD, we do FEA, all of the simulation. We do the testing there. We have validation testing there. We're validating parts for our global footprint out of Mexico. So I think that's a difference. We also have a very strong group of innovation where we're doing the R&D, the forward thinking. So we're very excited about that, because for sure in Mexico you can get not only the labor, the workforce, some incentives in some cases from the state, from the federal government, but also you can get the talent at the technical level, at the management level, and as Armando said, a very, very good work ethic from the people in Mexico.
And Armando, same question, because I would imagine Nemak needs very specific kind of technical talent.
Yes.
And again, how are you finding that talent in Mexico?
Well, we are located in the northern part of Mexico, where it has a very long tradition of having very solid universities, very good technical schools. And I think we have been taking advantage of that, of those resources. There is another important element, John, demographics. The average age of a Mexican is 27 years old. Of course, I'm older, but I think it's important to tell you that 50% of the population in Mexico is below 30 years old. And we are today having in Mexico a lot of people that are willing to go for technical studies, engineering, And there is an abundance. Just to compare a data with the US, which the country is 3 times bigger than Mexico, we have the same number of students studying engineering in Mexico, so it's becoming very attractive. Automotive industry in Mexico represents today 70% of the GDP. It's becoming quite relevant and very, very attractive for people to work in this industry.
Why is that? Because in so many other places in the world, it's like they want to go into the high-tech industry, not necessarily automotive. What's different in Mexico?
I think that's a great question, John, and I think this has been part of our success. In more developed countries, I must to admit that there are other industries more glamorous. Here in the States, you have in the Silicon Valley people that are willing to go the brightest and more relevant. I still believe that there are a lot of bright people in the automotive industry. And I think, again, people are rediscovering the manufacturing sector in the US. We have 4 plants in the US, and as you are totally aware, we struggle to get talent, technical talent. We're fighting in every opportunity to try to attract the same as we do in Mexico, Germany, or other countries that we have plants.
Juan, it seems to me that Mexico really put an effort into training people. Real big emphasis on education just in the last decade or so, because if you go back earlier into the free trade agreement, it seemed all that Mexico was offering were the maquiladoras with cheap labor, and then China sort of took all that away. Now my understanding is there's more manufacturing coming back to Mexico because it's not just cheap labor, you've got the engineering and the manufacturing talent.
That's right, and not just that. We have a countries in favor of working capital. We're in favor of doing business. That's what Mexico is doing right now. We have extraordinary good agencies as ProMexico that's exactly there to help you to establish your business and make it happen. And by the way, we have here in Detroit, one of the offices working on that. But it's not just that. The government has a compromise with the private industry to make it happen. It's a compromise to long-term investment that's going into Mexico to work with them and to be a partner. And that means that private education, infrastructure, and really be there when it's needed. Just give an example. When NAFTA was signed, the average education in Mexico was maybe 6 years, average, all the country. Today, we're close to 10, and we, as an example, when we talk average, we have a lot of engineers, we have a doctorate degrees, and things are changing. And now, to complete about the image, people believe that automobile manufacturing doesn't mean a lot of high tech. In my opinion, it's one of the highest techs ever. And we can see that today here in the show. I'm impressed what I'm seeing today. Not just the technologies, how the use of those technologies. And what's interesting is we have those developments in Mexico and together again as a partnership with the United States.
Mm-hmm. So Jose, as you look around the show and see everything, and you look at, here we are very early in 2015, how does the year look for you?
I think the year looks very good for us. Of course, if we look at what we see locally in the regional show here in Detroit, a very exciting product, an industry that we were talking about this earlier. 5 years ago, of course, after the crisis, the mood was a lot different. And I guess that also needs to remind us that you cannot keep thinking that everything is going to go up all the time. So let's take advantage of the good times. Let's take advantage of the industry booming. But let's not forget that there are cycles, like in any industry. So you need to be disciplined at the same time. You need to be cautious in some cases. But what I can see here is exciting products, exciting technology, lots of people. Somebody was saying, I think Armando was saying, smiles in the faces of people. So very excited to be here.
Armando, I'll give you the final thought. Same thing. What's the outlook for the year? And just as Jose raised the issue, we know this is a cyclical industry.
Right. For Nemak, 2014 was the best year ever. We are optimistic about the industry, especially in North America. Europe certainly is in much better shape than it was several years ago. South America, we still have some issues that need to be solved. China is still growing at a good pace. So in general terms, we're very optimistic about the future in the next few years for Nemak.
Very good. With that, gentlemen, we're going to wrap this up. Fascinating discussion. I love getting the point of view from Mexico, not just as I typically see it here in the United States. So I want to thank you all. Jose de Nigris from Katcon, Armando Tamez from Nemak, and Juan Solana from the Consul General of Mexico. thank you so much for enjoying this conversation, or certainly I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
With that, we're going to wrap up our first day of the Autoline Supplier Symposium. I want to invite you to come back. We've got some terrific topics that we're going to be doing right here, same place, same time, but in tomorrow, looking at some of the directed buy directives from OEMs to their suppliers and talent retention. How do you go out and get it? We touched on that a little bit. We'll dive more into that tomorrow. I'm John McElroy. I want to thank all of you for having joined us for this day one of the 2015 Autoline Supplier Symposium.
The Autoline Supplier Symposium is brought to you by our signature sponsor, Hyundai, New Thinking, New Possibilities, and also by Borg Warner, Feel Good About Driving, Continental Automotive, The Future in Motion. Learn more at continental-automotive.com. Henkel, excellence is our passion. And by IAC, inspiration comes from within.